and he kept taking others before me. And I stood there waiting, and then everybody had gone finally, and he had to accept my offerings. And he didn't look at them. He just threw them across the lab and said, "Get out of here." And I said, "What was wrong with my work?" And he said, "I don't know what your work looks like, but you belong behind the kitchen sink."
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of The Mountains We Climb. In each episode, we'll be diving into the mind of someone who's overcome significant challenge and adversity in their life so we can see what is really possible and what it really takes. I'm your host, Jordan Kilpatrick Smith, and today we're going to be exploring the journey of Dr. Oksana Sawiak and her story of escaping a war-torn country, overcoming multiple language barriers, and enduring blatant prejudice and discrimination, and still became the first woman in the world to achieve Master of the Academy of General Dentistry. Dr. Sawiak, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, guys, just before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that you can post your comments and questions live throughout the episodes in the comment section right below this video in the Facebook group. So anything you post there, we'll be able to see and answer. All right, housekeeping's out of the way. Dr. Sawiak, where do we start? Where's your journey start?
Well, my parents were on the way out of Ukraine because of the Russians coming in. And so I was born in Poland. The Russians came to Poland, so we were transported into Germany. At the age of 3, my father died he was killed by a truck. And so my mother and I were forced into the DP camps, displaced persons camps in Germany. So it was life in the barracks with one room per family, and the rooms were the walls were the blankets that were provided by the United Nations. And till now, I cannot face peanut butter or oatmeal because that was plentiful and forced down our throats. And so I ended up doing, of course, Ukrainian school in the camp and learning German. So I did grade 1 in Germany.
So you didn't, was Polish your native tongue?
No, Ukrainian.
Ukraine. Okay, sorry. And
Yeah.
then you had to learn German.
That's right.
To do, okay.
And so we were in camp until I was 7 when the DP camps were being disbanded. And so even though it was war-torn Germany and a lot of bombing and fleeing into bunkers and that kind of thing. And apparently my mother really was very frustrated because whenever a bomb would fall, I would fall asleep and become dead weight. So for her to drag me around was more difficult than if I had been running with her.
Right.
But anyways, at the age of 7, we left Germany and were invited to go to Sweden by a man who had been my father's best friend. And so I did grade 1 in Sweden. And I loved Sweden, but the Korean War broke out. And Sweden said, if the Russians want anybody, they can have them. And since my mother had been in the underground, we had to leave. And so we ended up in Canada under the sponsorship of Ray Nathishan's father. And so I went to grade 1 in Canada again. So I did grade 1 in 4 languages.
Wow.
But of course, I was tall for my age, and I had already been writing with pen and ink, that's an ink well, and doing cursive calligraphy, and multiplying and dividing. And here I am being given a pencil, told to print and add column of 2s. And so I was strapped for adding instead of multiplying, or for multiplying instead of adding.
And so when you say strap, you mean like they took a strap and hit you with it?
Yes, because the teacher had wanted to mark some papers. And I came up to her with the work finished well before everybody else was, because I just counted the number of 2s and multiplied, and I was done in 2 minutes, and the rest of the class was there for 20 minutes or whatever.
Right.
So because I did not speak English, of course I was bullied. I went to school in Kew Beach in Toronto, and that was a very, shall I say, WASP community. And I had come from a culture where you wear a pinafore to school. When the teacher asks you a question, you stand up, you curtsy, you thank the teacher for asking you the question, you answer it, and then you sit down. And of course, that was ridiculed.
Right.
And so it was, bullying and that kind of thing.
So when you were in high school, when you were in school being bullied, because I know that this is something that a lot of people have to go through, right? Where did that leave you? Like, how did that leave you feeling about yourself and about coming to Canada and about all of this journey so far?
Well, it made me feel very lonely and a need to be very self-sufficient.
Right.
Because, for instance, in grade 7, I had my arm broken because somebody didn't like the fact that I was first in class. And then in grade 8, between the Negro gang and the Jewish gang, I was beaten up. So at that point, the teacher decided he was going to keep me after school. And I was honored because I was asked to do the boards. And of course, everybody else said, "You're brown-nosing." And he would drive me home. Unfortunately, there was an ulterior motive in his driving me home, and ended up being molested by the teacher. So trusting was very difficult.
So grade 7, people, you weren't just bullied, they broke your arm.
Yeah.
And then in grade 8, you got beat up by different gangs.
By 2 gangs getting together and waiting for me when I was leaving, because I was called a brown noser.
Right.
Because I was first in class all the time. And studying came easily to me. I never had problems getting top marks. And of course, I had a mother who very much said, if you don't study, you're not going to get anywhere. So I was keen.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it came easily to me. I didn't have to study a great deal. I had to read it once and I was fine.
Yeah. And then, so here you are, you're young, you've gone through all of this stuff, and a teacher is there to support you, right? He says, "Stay after, I'll drive you home." And then he breaks the trust in the worst way he possibly could have.
Yes. And then he tells my mother that if I don't speak English at home, I'll never make high school, or I'll never finish grade 12. So my mother didn't speak English. And that sat very, very heavy on me, I guess. So in grade 12, when we had the SAT tests, one of them was English Lit. And I got 99.9% in it. And it came to me in a little paper, a strip of paper. And I don't know why, but I felt like I wanted to vindicate myself. So I took that strip of paper to that teacher. He didn't even remember me. But I thought, I didn't need to speak English at home.
Yeah. So how did you where did the strength to keep going through that come from? Because I know that a lot of people being both literally and mentally beaten down time and time again makes them say, screw it, I'm not doing anything. Right? So,
I think the example of my mother, because no matter what, she found a way. Being a widow in her 20s, not being prepared for a life of work. She was prepared to be her husband's wife, to run a house with servants, to be a decoration, to be a hostess. And so she had to overcome that. And also, she would say to me, I really don't think you have a choice. You either overcome it or we go in the gutter.
Right.
So I think that was mostly that. And also my drive to get out of the situation that we were in at the time, because she had to work in a factory. We moved quite often because of school and because of other things. So.
Yeah. So by the time you were finishing high school, where were you in your mental space? Like, what were you thinking about the world, about yourself, about the people around you?
I had my scouting, which I think was a huge, and my Ukrainian community, which was a huge support. Because scouting, I loved it. I excelled in it. I became a leader, and I enjoyed helping other people grow. Certainly, I liked the structure of it. So there were a lot of benefits to me there. And singing in choirs. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was an avid reader. And also had some, one of the hobbies that I had was embroidery. So I was always busy. That's one thing I never did a lot of, is introspection.
Right. And do you feel like that lack of introspection was what allowed you to just, like, what I'm hearing is you kind of put the blinders on and you said, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Am I right there? Okay. Mm-hmm. And you had this, despite all of this crap that was being thrown at you, you had a really strong support community with you.
Yeah. Cool. Yes, I think that the Ukrainian community in Toronto, which was the church, the scouts, the social, was very, very important for us.
Cool. So what happened next after high school there?
I wanted to get into a career where I knew I would have the ability to be independent, whether I was married or not. And seeing my mother's situation, I felt that was very important, because whether I wanted to get married, but I also knew that if something happened, I need to be prepared. And so I looked at the various options, I knew I wanted to help people. And so at first I thought I would be going into math, physics, and chemistry, but then that didn't help people, and it was too dry. So I started looking at the professions, and medicine did not appeal to me only because it was life and death.
Right.
But dentistry, I thought, I'm still helping people, and it's an option that is a healing profession. Little did I know that it wasn't. At the time, we didn't have the money. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I was working every summer from the time I was in grade 8. But most of the time I had to help with rent or other things that didn't allow me to save that money. So I had had an Ontario scholarship level of grades, but I did not do well in one of my subjects. By the way, going back to grade 12, where we were told to choose our university or college or whatever, I had made an application into dentistry. My guidance counselor tore it up. And I said, why was this torn up? And she said, because you have the intelligence of a grade 12 grad, you won't make grade 13. And I asked, what do you base that on? Because I've been first in class right through. And she said, because your IQ test, which I wrote in a high fever, shows that your intelligence level is grade 12, no more. So at that point, I thought, there's my life going down the drain. And so I went to the vice principal and told him the story. And I said, I've been first in class if you take a look at my record. And the IQ test, first of all, I didn't know how to write an IQ test. And secondly, I was writing it in a fever. Mm-hmm. I did have exam anxiety too, which was another thing I had to overcome. And so he redid the application for me. Anyways, I was not allowed to take an extra subject that I was interested in grade 13 because they said you're overloaded. And I was forced by the circumstances to take geometry, which is a very poor subject for me. So I ended up missing my Ontario scholarship. But I did end up applying for a bursary. And I had second thoughts about the fact that I couldn't afford to go because of the cost of dental school. And then my mother's dentist said, I hear you're interested in going into dentistry. And I said, yes, but I'm concerned that I'm not going to have the money. And he said, well, if you're interested, if you ever need money, come to me and I'll back you up. Wow. And that was what I needed.
Yeah.
And at one point, I did end up borrowing $300 from him. So when I finished dentistry and went to him to repay him, he wouldn't take it. But that was the determining factor that allowed me to go. And so loans and summer jobs and living at home allowed me to finish dentistry.
Yeah. So I just want to take from the comments here. Justina is sending love for you. Darius says he's enjoying the video.
Thank you.
So, okay. So you got into dentistry then.
Yes.
Right. You got this loan from the dentist. You got into dentistry.
And I thought, because in Europe, 75% of dentists are women, I thought I was going into a female profession.
Right.
And my first day in class, and the 138 students, 6 women. And the professor stands up in front of the class and says, I don't know what's happening to dentistry, but women are taking over. It was the largest number of women going through since the Royal College of Dental Surgeons started the school. So that's the way it started. And when...
Can I just pause you there for a second?
Yeah.
When the professor stood up in front of your entire class and basically called you out, what did that feel like?
There were 6 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did that feel like for you?
It was a threat. Yeah. 2 of the women gave it back to him, and one of them quit that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was something. And the other thing that happened was I took a look in the front row, and the guy that had broken my arm in grade 7 was there. So that was interesting.
And so, how discouraged were you feeling through this? Or were you not? Were you just like...
No, I was challenged. I was challenged to overcome it because I thought, my mother has gone through a lot to get me to this point. I can't disappoint her, and I can't give up my life.
Right.
If I do it now, I'll give up my dreams for an independent life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an atmosphere of women should not take the place of men who are going to be the breadwinners. And so the guys would look at you as if you're taking the place of a man here. And of course, the demonstrators in the lab was another issue. I had taken my models and my impression to a demonstrator, instructor, and he kept taking others before me. And I stood there waiting. And then everybody had gone finally, and he had to accept my offerings. And he didn't look at them. He just threw them across the lab and said, "Get out of here." And I said, "What was wrong with my work?" And he said, "I don't know what your work looks like, but you belong behind the kitchen sink." And the interesting thing about it was we had our 45th class reunion. And of the men, over 50% of them were retired. Of the women, every one of us had still been working. So I got up and said to the class, "Remember when you said that women are not going to continue the profession because they're going to have babies and stay at home? Look at this."
What was their reaction to that?
Boo!
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, it is just mind-blowing to me, because any one of these single events that you have described would be enough to knock most people off their path.
Well, if your motivation is to build a life that is sustainable, I think that, if your mind is on the goal, and if you're, I guess, have a very defined goal, then you stick with it.
Yeah. It really is, like, this story that you're still kindly sharing with us. It's really showing the power of the mind, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so
you'd cry and go home, and your mother would say, "Just suck it up."
Right.
Because I lived in days when, if the teacher gave you the strap and you'd come home and complain to to your parents, they'd give you the strap too, because you must have deserved it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the overall mentality was different.
Yes.
And you had the big support network, right?
Yes.
And you had, it sounds to me like you had the gratitude where you said, well, like I was not going to miss this opportunity that my mother had worked so hard for, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry. Okay. Please
Yeah.
continue.
And then the first year of dentistry, I became the editor of the school newspaper, which was an elected position. And I thought, wow, they did elect me, but it was really dying. The newspaper was not doing well. And so I wrote an editorial, tongue-in-cheek editorial, saying, women make better dentists than men. Because of the manual skills that we, have with needlework and all this other stuff. Anyways, the president of the student council wrote back a very nasty, foul language letter, which I published in it. And the dean called me on the carpet and said, one more like that and you're out of dentistry. So freedom of speech was also not something that we had.
Yeah. Jeanette says you're an amazing woman. Lindsay from our networking group says that you're an inspiration and he's glad he gets the opportunity to meet with you every single week.
Thank you.
I missed a few of them there because they're coming in, but I just wanted to share those with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you were the editor. You got shut down, freedom of speech. And I think this is so good for people like young adults right now, because I think when I was going through university, I think I really appreciated all of that type of stuff that we had, but I think a lot of people really took it for granted. And I think them hearing this, I hope, is a big wake-up call. Like, we are so lucky.
Yes.
We are so lucky.
And we also take our rights for granted, but also we trust things like government to give us what we need, rather than saying it's my responsibility to keep my freedom and to keep my, to guard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where does this continue? What's next?
Well, I graduated from dentistry and didn't have the confidence that I could be released onto the public yet. So I did an internship at the Toronto General and Toronto Western hospitals, which was a real wake-up call, because the medical interns really looked down on the dental ones. And we worked just as many hours as the medical ones did. We would be on call 24 hours every third day.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often I would have to be at the hospital in a room that was more like a closet because I couldn't go home. But when the internship finished, I was at a party celebrating, and I got a call for an emergency. Somebody had been had a severe infection of a tooth, and I had to go into emerge. So I went to see this person, and was waiting for the medical intern to do an IV for him, because he had been treating his own infected wisdom tooth with leeches.
With leeches?
Yes. And had spread the infection quite badly, and his jaw had broken. So I needed him on IV antibiotics so that I could wire his jaw.
Yeah.
And so I had gone into the lounge, the interns lounge, to just, at the time I smoked, and had left my stuff there. So when I finished the procedure, I came back and I got kidnapped by a bunch of interns who were by this time quite inebriated, put on a stretcher and taken into the orthopedic room, and they put a cast on my leg with my sandal and my stocking on still. So I thought, yeah, prank. Went back to the party with a cast on. And the next day, I go to the hospital to get this cast off. Brand new interns, they want an x-ray before they take this cast off. Nobody would touch it. So the brand new intern said, okay, I'll do it for you. And he comes with a saw that he's never used to cut this. And I'm sitting there like but that was a fun kind of thing.
So you were at this party. They're like, hey, we need you to come do this surgery.
Yeah,
you go to, right. So you go to the hospital, you do the surgery, and then the other interns come, put you on a stretcher, take you to a room, put a cast on your leg, take you back to the party. And then the next day you come back and they're like, oh, sorry, we got to take an x-ray. And then,
oh no, it wasn't the same interns, because the interns had, this was their last day.
Right.
So it was a new interns, and they didn't know that this was a prank.
Right. Okay.
I'm trying to tell them, who's going to put a cast on with a sandal underneath?
Right.
Oh, no. We have to be careful.
So things were looking up at this point then.
Yes. And so because I was married already and wanted a family, I interned for 2 years and then bought a house to which I added a practice. So for 42 years for 40 of the 42 years that I practiced dentistry, I was practicing at home. That way I could have children and work. Mm-hmm. And usually I had live-in housekeepers. And because those housekeepers were mostly didn't speak English, because at that time getting nannies was not something you did because women stayed home.
Right.
So I was able to get new immigrants that needed a place to live and to work. So that was how I was able to raise a family.
Yeah. And then how did you come to be the first woman in the world to get the Master of Academy?
Well, I was always very curious. And patient would tell me, oh, did you hear of this or did you hear of that? And I'd follow through and look at it. And because I felt I was in a health profession, I would study nutrition, I would study applied kinesiology, I would study various things that allowed me to be what I felt a better health professional. Didn't at that time realize that I was using amalgam fillings with mercury in them that was harming everybody.
Right.
And so when I finally heard about it, it was about 7 years into practice that I'm poisoning myself in my patients. I started using less and less, and eventually stopped using it. But at that time, the only alternative was gold. So in order to use these materials, I had to take a lot of courses on how to do it well, how to do it properly. So I went to the L.D. Pankey Institute, which is considered an institute of higher dental learning. And they teach you whole body dentistry.
Right.
And that's what I found fascinating, because that was what I thought I had gone into dentistry for rather than tooth carpentry.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
tooth carpentry,
yeah. And unfortunately, dentistry still believes that teeth are not part of the body.
As in they look at it as this isolated section, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there's an infection in the gums, you cut it away rather than cure it. If you have a tooth that has a toothache and they can't figure it out, they take the nerve out and do a root canal, and don't think of all the things that happen to a person afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I, because I had stopped using amalgams, the more aware, more holistic patients started being attracted to me. And of course, they'd bring me a brochure about this kind of nutrition, or about vitamin C, or about this or about that. And I'd follow that up. So I was learning all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing my family complained about. At least two weekends a month, you're away. But I was driven. And so I belonged to the Academy of General Dentistry, and got the fellowship, and eventually got the master's. And so I'm standing there having my picture taken, and I asked how many women are in our master's. None. And the fellow beside me, who was black, and he said, how many blacks have a master's? And he said, none. So we were the first.
Well, it gave me goosebumps. That's awesome.
Yeah. There were 75 masters at that time in the world. And only I was the third in Canada to achieve that. And most of them were military, because the military requires the reservists to do active duty, and active duty meant taking a course.
Right.
So many of them were paid for by the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I got the master's. And an interesting event, when I started taking courses, I couldn't afford all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard about a course in Walter Reed Hospital. And it was mostly for Army and military dentists, but there were 3 civilian spots. And it was affordable. All I had to pay for was my room and board and flight. I actually didn't fly, I drove. And it was scary, because all these military guys are in the hotel, and me.
Mm-hmm.
No other women. And I come to the course trying to find somebody to talk to, and of course nobody will talk to me. So the breaks, I just sat there alone. And for supper, I went to the restaurant alone. And then this was a 3-day course. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a banging on my door. And I thought, boy, I don't know anybody here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to open it. Stopped. At 5 o'clock in the morning, same thing again. And that scared me. Anyways, the next morning I went back to class, and a guy comes up and says, "Oh, were you dancing all night?" And I said, "Yes." Oh, because I came and knocked on your door. And I said, what did you want? And of course, you know what he wanted, right?
Right. And he felt that just showing up at 3 a.m. was the best way to do
Yeah.
that. Right. Okay.
So this is the kind of thing that I repeatedly encountered in various courses because I was often the only woman there.
Yeah.
And the other thing I encountered was, oh, she knows something? Like when I was taking a course at Harvard, it was on how the joint is related to orthodontic treatment. And by this time, I had studied the bite and knew a lot about it. And I had done Pankey already, this institute in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so the professor asked a question and I answered it more than once. I was ostracized the rest of the course. So that's the kind of thing that you end up, because you're a woman in a male profession, that is not pleasant.
Yeah. So it didn't matter what you did. It was always wrong.
Well, whether wrong or whether a threat, I think more a threat.
Right. So whatever you did, it wasn't supported and promoted, right? Okay. So we have a question here for you, and it's after enduring so much, right? Time and time again, what continued to be your driving force, your motivation to continue?
My patients and trying to help them with their health. And that's what I still do.
Yeah.
It's a passion. It's been a passion all my life. And trying to show people there's a better way than drugs. There's a better way than surgery. For instance, somebody comes to me and says, I need carpal tunnel surgery. I'll tell them, in 3 ozone injections, I can get rid of your carpal tunnel.
Right.
They look at me and say, oh, but my doctor said. So it's still a lot of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it's still a passion for me to at least tell them that there's another way, or at least be of help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that position where you are kind of going against the grain,
yeah,
it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to hold your own there and say, I'm still doing this, right? So kudos to you.
Well, you know, if you see people suffering because their doctor said so, it makes you angry too.
I get that.
And you want to sort of beat the door and say, don't do that.
Yeah. I see that a lot with gastric bypass. That's something I look at and I'm like, come on. No, I don't want to.
Yeah, I know a lady that had a gastric bypass. First, to get there, she had to be on these drinks for a year.
Right, like the shakes?
Yeah, lost 67 pounds. She was 450 pounds. And then had the gastric bypass, lost, I think, 127 pounds. In total, I think 200 pounds. After a year, she started gaining back. No stomach, and yet she started gaining back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not the answer.
Lindsay says, when your profession is based on genuinely helping others, you stand apart. It also makes you stronger mentally and physically.
But, you know, when you have your family not believing what you do, even though they've seen the results of it, it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have a few questions for you before we wrap up. And this is a hard question to answer, and I realize that, but how have these challenges shaped your life and who you are?
I think made me stronger, more controversial maybe, it has really cemented an attitude of, if I'm right, I'm right. It's my truth. And so if I meet somebody that doesn't believe it, I just shrug and keep going.
Yeah. And so do you feel like if you had not experienced these challenges and that life had not put all of these obstacles for you to climb, that you would not be as strong as you are today?
Definitely.
Right? Yeah. Great.
But, I sometimes think I didn't have to have all of them.
It does sound like multiple people's worth of, like more than most people will ever experience, right?
Yeah, and I hope they don't.
Yeah. So let's say someone's listening to this and they're finding themselves stuck in some similar situation to what you've gone through. What advice would you give to them, or what would you like to say to them?
Well, one of the things that helped me is learning hypnosis and doing self-hypnosis. When you can control your body via your mind, whether it's stress or whether it's sleep or whether it's whatever, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
And so that's a modality that anybody can learn. When people say I can't be hypnotized, it's because they've never gone to the right person to learn.
Right.
If you say you can't meditate, it's because you haven't learned. Right? So it's one modality that has helped me through life, and I encourage people to learn something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
When a brick falls on somebody's head and they don't feel the pain, it's because they've gone into a hypnotic state right away. And so if you learn hypnosis, you can do that for yourself and mitigate the brick.
Right.
Okay.
And so a lot of people think that hypnosis is like, I'm going to like quack like a duck on stage, right?
Actually, I look at it this way. Nobody can be hypnotized against their will.
Yeah.
And they do not have to be weak-willed to be hypnotized, because just before you go to sleep, you are in hypnosis. It's just the alpha state. When you're meditating, you're in hypnosis. It's just learning to use that state for health or for calming or for stress or whatever.
Yeah.
Is what hypnosis teaches you.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Because all hypnosis is self-hypnosis.
Right. And the hypnotist is really just facilitating
That's
that, right? Am I correct in saying that hypnosis is like a very intense focus?
Yes. And we are often going in and out of beta. Beta state is your left brain activity, et cetera, your mathematics. Alpha state is where you create, where you daydream, where you're watching television. If you don't know whether the lights were all green or all red on your way home, you were in hypnosis.
Right.
So it's a natural state. Children are in hypnosis most of the time until they're 7.
Right.
So those are things that people don't know.
Yeah.
And they think that hypnosis is just what they see on stage.
Yeah.
But I had surgery under hypnosis and local alone. And both the surgeon and the anesthetist had actually refused to do that. And I said, well, if I misbehave, you can give me the anesthetic, but let me try hypnosis and local, just freezing.
Yep. And
I'd had a hysterectomy that way. So it's very powerful. In India, there was a study of 300 surgeries done under hypnosis alone. So that's the power that we have of our mind.
Yeah.
And if we learn to use it, we're much more powerful.
Yeah. I think that the human mind is one of the most incredible tools, and yet we don't understand it, or we as an individuals tend to not understand it and what it's capable of. And I think that you sharing your story really shows how powerful it is, right? Like, people are not using it to the potential that they could be.
That's correct.
And so I'm hearing that hypnosis, you're saying, is an incredible tool to help people use it to its full capacity.
Yes, with hypnosis, you can slow down your heart, you can reduce your blood pressure, you can overcome trauma, and of course, the next step from hypnosis is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I learned from Bandler and Grinder, the people that invented it. And NLP is a much faster modality than self-hypnosis, but it's based on hypnosis as well.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else that you want to share? Any advice or thoughts that you'd like to share with people?
We live in a world that unfortunately is being controlled by the few. Our freedom of speech has been totally shut down. And if we continue that way, we are going to have very few choices in the way we treat our health, the way we raise our families, the way we eat, or anything else in the world. And I think that we need to protect our freedoms. And that's my message to the world. And that includes freedom of choice in healthcare, in things like vaccinations, in things like schooling, that kind of thing. So I encourage people to go and find out what is really going on, whether it's in medicine or whether it's in dentistry. I teach a lot of courses in whole body dentistry. Mm-hmm. That's what I would call it. I also teach dental offices, the biological approach to dentistry. So it's something that I'm passionate about, and I really encourage people to find out what's behind whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
Whether it's, they need surgery, or whether it's they've got cancer and they've got to go through chemo and radiation. There's so much information out there. And I know it's a labyrinth especially on Google. But if somebody calls me and asks me, what do you think of this and what do you think of that? I can give them my opinion, which is more holistic or more natural. There's an herb for this, or you don't need a mammogram that's destructive. You can go for thermography. Right. All these alternative things, they're called alternative, but they're actually more natural. And, when you have herbs in your garden that can eliminate a headache, that can lower your blood pressure, that can improve your digestion, why not study them?
Yeah. So be really curious.
Yes.
Awesome. Justina's saying you are a phenomenal woman. And I think everyone that's listening to this is going to agree with that. So if people want to contact you, how can they reach out to you? Where can they find you?
My website is drsawiak.com.
Okay.
And I have a clinic in Georgetown.
In Ontario?
Georgetown, Ontario, called Sawiak Integrative Wellness Institute. And I also have a book out and another one coming out. And then I have an app that is coming out in a few weeks called The Health Detective, because that's what my clients have called me.
Yeah. And so the spelling on the website. I will post it in the description as well, but it's drsawiak.com.
Yes.
Fantastic. And what's your book called? And where can they find it?
The first book is You Well, an exponential guide to health. If they go to my website, there's also an ebook that they are welcome to download by just putting their email in.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a monthly update, newsletter kind of thing, that talks about one subject at a time. So if they'd like to get that, they just have to go on the website and request it.
Fantastic.
And then if somebody wants to delve further, I do a 20-minute complimentary consultation by phone or Skype or Zoom.
And they can find that on your website if they want to contact you for that?
Yes, the contact information is there.
Great. One comment I want to read, and then I want to ask the listeners a question to leave them with. And the comment is from Jeanette. Thank you, Dr. Sawiak, for being so open about your experiences. Your strength and determination to succeed has been so inspiring.
Thank you. I'm glad.
And so my question for you as the listener is, after hearing this story, what are you going to do? What is your first step? What have you learned from this that you can now implement into your life? Joining me next week is Diana Lockett, a speech language pathologist, yoga teacher, realignment coach, and author in a best-selling series. It's going to be happening right here in this Facebook group at 10 a.m. Eastern. See you then.